My name is Mark Hallett. This is June 13th, 2010. We're in Buenos Aires at the beginning of the Movement Disorder Society meeting. Today I'm interviewing Professor Alfredo Berardelli, who's in the midst of a distinguished career in movement disorders and has been one of the people that was very active in the origin of the Movement Disorder Society. Today we'll be talking both about his own career and about the Movement Disorder Society itself. So, Alfredo, we'd like to start by talking about your own career. Perhaps you can tell us how you first got interested in medicine and neurology and then movement disorders.
Thank you very much. I graduated in medicine in 1976, and then I went to the School of Neurology in my country, in Rome. So I took my specialization in neurology in 1981.
Well, how did you get interested in doing neurology as opposed to some other field?
Well, the reason was that during my years at the university, I started to prepare thesis. We usually prepare our thesis during our studies period, and I started working in a laboratory of neurophysiology. So I started in this way. So I got interested in research and in neuroscience.
So what was the project that you were working on then?
Well, the project by that time was on doing some experiment on peripheral nerves, trying to calculate the conduction velocity of the different type of fibers of the peripheral nerve fibers. And we were doing this experiment on animals, and so I started in that period in this way. Mm-hmm. So I started to get interested in neuroscience. And actually, after I got my degree and started my school in neurology, my teacher by that period, that was Professor Manfredi, he was very much interested in doing research activity. And I have actually to say that he has been the first person encouraging me in doing research activity. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing started in this way.
Mm-hmm. Right, so then you did your neurology under Professor Manfredi.
Yes, I did my period. We have in Italy by that time, we had our specialization school lasted 4 years. Now it's last 5 years because it's common to all the various European countries. And I did my training in general neurology and also in specific areas. But I managed doing at the same time also some research activity. And beside that period that I was working on in doing some animal experiment, then I actually moved to human being experiments. And by that time my first interest was to study reflexes, and in particular reflexes generated and organized at the level of the brainstem. So that one was my first project. So we did studies physiological mechanism and also on modification of these reflexes in patients with cortical lesions, in patients with extrapyramidal lesions. So I started in that way.
Was that an area that Professor Manfredi had been interested in for some time, or not?
No, he actually had been also always interested in doing animal experiments. So I actually started this area on my own. So it was a new thing for the laboratory by that time.
Mm-hmm. I think I recall that you were doing work comparing the blink reflex and the corneal reflex and looking at the different afferent fibers. So that seems like it was sort of a combination of your early work looking at different fibers and reflexes.
Yes, this is actually it's true. That one was one of the main major goal to compare the different type of stimulation in order to evoke the same type of reflexes. And I was rather very much excited by that project, although it was a small project, because I remember that it was actually, at the end we managed to publish a paper in neurology, and at that time, in that period, it was a nice thing to have a paper published on your own research and on your own project.
Mm-hmm. Right. So then, what happened then in the course of your career?
Then, actually, what happened was that by that time we had there was, I mean, people liked to go abroad for doing some further experience. So I had the opportunity to, through a colleague of mine that was working by the time in Boston, I got in touch basically with you, and that I knew you were doing work on motor control. So starting from this small project on reflexes, then I moved on the idea of working on a motor system and motor control. So I remember that by that time I got in touch with you, and after 1 year of correspondence, by that time we didn't have any email. So I remember that it usually took exactly 1 month. I used to write a letter, and then the time to arrive to the States, the time that you replied to me, then after 1 month I knew exactly what was going on. So then I went to Boston in 1980-81, and I worked with you in your laboratories on motor control in Boston for almost 2 years. And I remember that although I had this small experience on reflexes, but that one was a completely new field. So it was difficult and hard for me to learn, trying to learn as quick as possible all these new methodologies and new things. And in that period, I concentrated mainly on the investigation of stretch reflexes and investigation of movement, voluntary movement of the arm in healthy subject and in patient. I think I enjoyed it very much because we managed doing a lot of things. We really, I certainly started a completely new thing for me, and was very productive period. So it was very good experience.
Yes, I do remember that as being a very nice time. I certainly enjoyed having you in the laboratory, and things went very well. What would you think from that work at that time is still the most enduring scientific result? I mean, people still refer to some of the work that we did then.
I think that the majority of things are still important thing. A number of people confirmed and found exactly the same thing that we found. So I think that we did a number of things that now are established and now are clearly things in the literature without any doubt. So I think it's a very stable results, stable research.
So then, after you left,
then
what did you do then?
When I left Boston, I went back to Rome, and I started to build up a laboratory because my goal was to pursue what I started doing in your place, and I started actually doing this, and I managed to do this. But in that period, I didn't have, when I went back to my university, I didn't have a permanent position, a permanent academic position. So I had to wait a bit more for this type of thing. So I decided to go again abroad for one or 2 years, and I decided to go to some place in Europe that was closer to my town, my country. And following the project that we did together in Boston, the ideal place by that time was basically London, where Professor David Marston was working and was a very important person in neurology, in particular in this field. So I got in touch with him, and he was actually very happy to, and he accepted me also because he knew that I worked already with you and so on. So I went to London, and again I went only for 6 months, but then I remained for almost 2 years. Because by that time also David Marston also asked me to remain, and to remain there even after my fellowship was over. So in total I spent 2 years. And one thing that I remember that was a nice thing when I decided to go there was that I was very much attracted by the style of the paper that they used to write. Because obviously before going there I used to read the work that they were doing. And just as a small record that I have in my memories, that I remember the description of the experiments that they used to do in their paper. For instance, they used to say, on February the 3rd of 1980, we performed 3 experiments, and one of the experiments was CDM, the other experiment was PAM, that was Pat Merton. So this style was very particular, at least for me. And the other thing that I remember was this observation that in their physiological paper they always referred to tulips. And when I started to read, I couldn't understand what was tulips. Took some time to understand, translate that the tulips were referred to the sort of EMG integration that varied and had the shape of a tulip. So this was one of the things that I still remember that attracted me a lot, going there. So I went there, and a very, very nice period, very productive. And I have been very lucky because I also had the chance to work together with very nice people in that period. Beside David Marsden, that he coordinated the work, but the actual work in the laboratory was done by myself together with, I like to remember 2 people at least. One John Rothwell, and the other is Philip Thompson. So we worked very much in a very nice, friendly way together for all the period that I remained there.
So the work that you were doing was largely both in reflexes and involuntary movement. So it was a similar type of work that you had begun working with me, and of course I also did my fellowship with David Marston, so it isn't surprising, I suppose, that it's the same theme.
Yeah. The other thing that we didn't do by that time together when I was in Boston, the reason was because it came afterwards. It was the whole study on motor cortex stimulation. It was an area where I think I have contributed quite a lot over the years, and that was a technique that was just published in a very informal way, or a simple way, when I arrived. So arrived there. So that one was one of the major things that we started working on. And obviously, as all the new technique, very nice new technique, because we have lots of things to do, and it's just matters of thinking the right experiment, thinking the right study.
So I remember one of the things that you told me, that you liked being in England since it was close to Rome and you could get back for a good meal from time to time.
Yes, absolutely, because the period in London was very good, but obviously I have to say that life in Rome is much better than in London, so so it's closer, and 2 hours you can go back to Rome. So.
Right, right. So then that was the end of the fellowship after 2 years, and did you then have a permanent position when you went back to Italy?
Actually, I started to have, I mean, all the bureaucratic things were I managed to finish all the various matters toward the end of my stay in London. So when I went back to Rome, I got my permanent position, and then I remained in Rome and continued my work. In that period, obviously, I knew exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my work life. So I continued doing activities in the same field that actually I started with you. I continued with David Marston, and that I'm still doing at the moment. So motor control, movement disorders, and from a research point of view and also from a clinical point of view.
So from a administrative point of view, just you sort of worked your way up the ladder academically, and you are now a full professor there. That's a very slow process in Italy to do that.
It's a slow process because well, there are difficulties. Probably also in part from economical reason, in part because people remain at work for many years. They retire late, and therefore I mean, you get your position always at a certain age. I'm actually been quite lucky because I managed reaching my goal while I was still, I can say, young. So
Good.
I think it's.
So the work that you've done in the last period since you've been back in Italy, what are the things that you're most proud of in terms of the scientific accomplishments that you've made?
Well, I think the field, my field has been always the trying to understand what we say pathophysiology of a condition. So trying to understand the mechanism that goes wrong and mechanism that may be responsible for the the disease, for the symptoms, for the features of clinical feature of disease. So I think that I have, I'm rather proud saying that I contributed in understanding the reason why we have a number of diseases, including Parkinson disease, dystonia, and other motor disorders. And perhaps I'd like to add that the other thing that I like to say is that I concentrated quite a lot on a disease that was not even clearly known a few one decade ago, that is dystonia. I mean, dystonia is a disease that now we are trying to understand. We are understanding now. And I think I'm rather proud of what a number of works, a number of studies that we have done on dystonia. At the beginning, all the studies were mainly physiological studies, neurophysiological studies. Recently, and I like to say that also that I've done this with a very nice collaboration that I have with other Italian neurologists, and I'm thinking now to one of my colleagues that is called Gianni De Fazio, that is associate professor in Bari. We are doing a number of studies trying to understand also risk factor, clinical features, and also the possible connection between environmental genetic causes of the disease. In this regard, I'd like also to say that one of the nice things in our area has been the idea to be able to collaborate with a number of people. And so I continue to, over the years, to collaborate with you, with people where I met in London, and we worked almost 30 years ago, and also other people in Italy. One of these persons is Giovanni Abruzzese, is another professor of neurology in Genoa. So I don't know why, I don't know whether it's a typical feature of movement disorder or whether it's just people that work in movement disorder, but certainly we always had these facilities in collaborating between groups, and this is one of the important things.
You were one of the first people to start using botulinum toxin. How did you get into that field?
Yes, I've actually been probably the first one that I used in Italy, because when botulinum toxin was presented and became to be used, I was in London by the time, so I had a chance to see the application, how to use. And when I went back to Rome, I immediately started in using. And so it's quite a number of years so far. I think it was botulinum toxin went in use in 1983, 84, I guess. something
Probably
like
something like that, yes. Right. All right. Well, let's shift for the now and start talking a little bit about the Movement Disorder Society. You were very active in both of the early forerunners of the Movement Disorder Society, both the old Movement Disorder Society and the International Medical Society of Motor Disturbances. Do you want to tell us about how you learned about both of those different societies and what your roles were as all this new activity began?
Yes, as you said, the two societies were almost parallel. Actually, I'm not sure whether the Movement Disorder Society started before or the International Movement or Disturbances, but almost at the same time. So the Movement Disorder Society was something that was really founded by Stanley Fan and David Marston, and the International Motor Disturbances was founded by a group of people from Germany, Rainer Benecke, Bastian Conrad, myself, you, and then it was immediately obvious that the two societies couldn't work at the same time in parallel. So it was very logical and very clever to join quite soon, and then create a very important society like the Movement Disorder Society. And I actually remember I can't remember the date exactly, but I remember the hotel in London where we had the meeting from the two, with people from the two groups, and Stanley Fan, David Master, Joe Yankovic, Tony Lang, myself, probably you, and someone else just joined in this this meeting, and then the two society were merged, and Stanley Fan was the president, by the first president.
It was probably David.
Was David Master. David Master was the first, and actually in that period, Tony Lang became secretary of the society, and I became secretary elect. So I really was there from the beginning of the society.
So in terms of the ISMD, the International Society of Motor Disturbances, it had originated in order to have meetings, whereas the old Movement Disorder Society just had the journal at first, and so, as you say, it was a natural merger of the groups. You had a role in one of the first meetings of the ISMD. I think it was probably the second meeting, is that right?
Yes, I had a role because, first of all, I think I was secretary, the second person that became secretary of that society. And then we organized, we organized a meeting in Rome. It was the second one. The first one was in Lausanne. And then the second one was in Rome. And by that time, I remember that we were very, very excited by the success of the meeting. And I remember that we had 400 only people. Now with our society, with our Congress, we do meeting almost 4,000 people. So by the time it seems it was an impossible thing to be able.
What do you recall about that meeting in Rome of the ISMD? Anything special that you can remember about that particular meeting?
Let me think. I remember. Well, I perfectly remember the room, the place that was at the Hilton Congress Center, and I remember. I still remember.
Oh, right, that was the one on the hill.
Yes, I still remember the face of lots of people participating there. I remember it was a nice meeting, and by that time the majority of talks were clinical or neurophysiological talks, because in that period we didn't have any other major approach to movement disorder. So I remember this.
But that also reminds me of another sort of synergy between the two societies, because the ISMD was a little more physiological and the old Movement Disorder Society was a little more pharmacological and clinical.
Yes, yes, you're perfectly right. The ISMD was certainly more physiological many people working in the physiology area were interested. On the other hand, the movement disorder were more pharmacological and also clinical. But I think we did very well in joining the two things. And actually, you probably remember that the first Congress the joint Congress was done in Washington. And you organized that Congress. It was the first one
that was the first one where the two societies met side by side, but
exactly.
Not actually joined at that time.
No, but the Congress right. was done, organized for both people. So that one was the very first act for going to for the joining process.
Right. In a way, it was sort of strange because it was called the First International Congress of Movement Disorders, although actually there had been the Lausanne meeting and the Rome meeting. I guess
probably we called the first
before.
Because it was the first
meeting with them all together for that. But then you also organized another meeting in Rome when the societies were all together for the
yes,
yes.
But that one was more recent. Obviously,
yes.
That one was in 2004. It was a very successful meeting because it was the first meeting that we had more than 3,500 people. So went very well financially and also from a scientific point of view. Yeah, I think I've been involved in a number of activities of the Movement Disorder Society.
So do you have any other memories or things that you want to recount about the early days of the Movement Disorder Society, or other anecdotes that might be of interest to people?
As we said, there's been the whole thing has been very intense because we always had a number of meetings, scientific meeting, but also in terms of organization of the society. The society is really doing very well and very active, and obviously there are things that are nice that we had. A lot of nice dinner, a lot of nice time that we had together with a number of people. But again, I think that one of the special features of the people of our society is that we see each other one or twice in a year, but it is always like we saw each other every day. So this means that beside the scientific approach, we are all very good friends, and I think we should be proud of this.
And how about your activities now? You are currently the chairman of the European section?
Yes, I've been, as I said before, the secretary of the society, and now I'm the chairman of the European section, and Europe is very active from this point of view, because, I mean, the movement disorder is an important field in neurology in Europe. And we are trying to do our best in promoting the society in the eastern part of Europe, where actually still there are problems in this way. So we have a nice group that we are working intensively on this thing.
So what do you think of the role of the Movement Disorder Society in relation to movement disorders as a subspecialty of neurology? What is the society contributing to?
I think that the Movement Disorder Society continue to grow in terms of organization and improving over the years, and I think has a very important role in education a very important role in promoting all the various issues related to movement disorder. So I think we should be very happy that we have been able to create such a society.
So in terms of giving young people advice, would you tell them that movement disorders is a good field to go into?
Yes, I think that movement disorder is a very nice field to move, to go. I think that it gives the opportunity to investigate brain function and at the same time to understand the patient. So if you if you work on this area, you certainly produce advances in the knowledge of brain work, but the beauty is that you see your patients in a different way because you understand more your patients. So I think this is the nice thing of movement disorder. What I think I would like to say is that people should, the most important thing is that people should enjoy the work that they do. So the movement disorder is a special field that you actually have fun when you do some nice experiment or nice study. And I think that this should be the major driving force for if you want to have to be successful.
So where do you see the field going? What will the field look like in the next 10 years?
I think that we, over the years, we have seen that molecular biology, genetic, probably gained expanding a lot. I think at the moment, I think that the integration of the various approaches possibly the best thing to do. To integrate, correlate the information that you can have from genetic, neurophysiology, neuroimaging. So integration of the various techniques is the way where the movement disorder should go.
Are we going to solve dystonia or solve Parkinson's disease, or are we going to have continuing work to do for many more years to come?
No, I think that we should, we will have to do many years of work before we solve continuously. But if you, for a moment, you think that some of these conditions were completely almost unknown 20 years ago, so I think we've done quite a lot of advancing.
So let's go back now and talk a little bit more about David Marston. As you mentioned earlier, he's one of the founders of the field of movement disorders. He was involved with both of the early societies, was the first president of the Joint Society. You had the opportunity to work with him for 2 years. Can you give us some more insights into him, how it was to work with him, and other aspects of his life and
yes,
and your interactions with him?
You met him, so you know how he was. He was certainly a extraordinary person in terms of ideas, in terms of work, and also he certainly had a special approach to the life in general. He certainly wanted he liked the thing that he wanted to do. So he liked his work, he liked his life, and he tried to convince and push people doing the same thing. So it was very nice working with him because you could have very long scientific conversation, and then afterwards very long dinner, or very long after dinner talking about other things, about life, about families, life, what we want to do in our life. So it was certainly a special person.
So when you talked about work, where did you talk about the work? Was it in the lab? Was it in the pub?
Well, we used to talk work certainly in the lab, but also in the pub. Also in the pub. In the pub or in some other places outside the department. Yeah.
Seem to remember you were telling me about sometimes writing notes on the papers in the pub and things like that.
Writing notes on bottles.
On bottles.
On piece of paper in the pub. That one was drawing scheme circuits, how basal ganglia work, are connected with motor cortex or the thalamus. So he used it to write while we were in the pub.
Right. So it was fun to talk with him about things. In terms of life and whatnot, did he have any special insights that were helpful in terms of your own thinking about life and how to live it?
His life.
Yeah. Well, you were saying that you were talking about not only work but about life and how to live it. And did you learn any particular lessons from him in that regard, or did you get any attitude from him about that?
Well, I think he certainly did the things that he thought that are necessary for doing for having a good life. So. Well, I mean, it's difficult to translate. I mean, he had a difficult life because he separated and then he married again. So he didn't have a very simple life in general. But I think that he always tried to find the best solution to have a nice life.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that he liked, you had mentioned before that movement disorders was fun, and so and I presume, well, I mean, I know that he really enjoyed doing his work, but I suppose he also tried to do that in the rest of his life, to have fun and to...
Yes, absolutely. He always liked to do things, but to have fun. But I think it's... we all should do this.
Right, now how about a little bit more about the interactions between David, and you mentioned John Rothwell and Philip Thompson and yourself. How was that working?
Well, the interaction was very good because all these people, I think, were all very much interested in work, and also, and again, very nice people. So interaction was very easy, very easy. I think that David Marston certainly liked John Rockwell, Philip Thompson. So he always considered very important collaborators, but also very close friends. And I think this was one of the reasons why we created this group of people. But even, as I said before, after 25 years or even more, we are still keep on doing collaborations, still writing paper together.
Mm-hmm. So how about commenting a bit more about Professor Manfredi? He was your first teacher. You actually worked under him when you went back to Rome for many years. In many ways, he was really one of the people that must be very, very important to you in terms of guidance over your career.
Yes, I think that I learned how to see a patient in the ward or in the outpatient clinic, looking at him. So I learned from him how to do. So he has been very important in this type of activity. And certainly the other thing that I learned from him is how to read the literature, how to read the various journals, how to write the important notes from each paper that I read. So he has been very, very important in getting all this experience for me.
And how about the other colleagues that you have in the Rome department? Who are the people that you've worked with most there?
Well, there were other people working at the same period on different type of projects. And again, I think that he managed to encourage all these people. So by that time, it wasn't very common in Italy, because I mean, Italy is certainly a very nice country, and we are very proud of our history. But certainly the idea to be open to go abroad, to start new things is something that it wasn't a very common thing in the Italian university. I think that in our group we managed doing this. So not only me, but also other people from our department went abroad and became important in the different fields.
So, is there anything else that you would like to mention, either about your career or about the society that we haven't touched on? I think we've touched on a lot of things already.
I would like to say that if I had to start again, I would do exactly the same thing, without changing anything, perhaps improving something. But I would do exactly the same type of career, same type of work, because I'm very happy with how things went.
Right, well, very good. Thank you very much for sharing all this information with us, and I'm sure that this will be very helpful to people in the future who want to know about all the founders of our society. So thanks again.
Thank you very much.